Mildly, the wizard replied. Now, don't glare at me like that. Aaron didn't rescue his father, which means that except for a few casualties, which you, with your horde of underlings, can readily afford, we're no worse off than before, and no better. What truly infuriated Kest wasn't the wear and tear on his henchmen. Those too weak to defend themselves deserved whatever they got. What nettled him was that, by arranging the raids on his various enterprises, Aaron had successfully concealed his true intentions. In other words, made a fool of him. Kesk wondered which of his other foes or rivals were actually responsible for the harassment his operation had suffered earlier in the evening. At the same time, the red-headed thief was invading his home. He vowed to find out and paid him back triple, but supposed it would have to wait till he settled the madding business with the Black Book. If, the wizard said, Aaron could be convinced, we'll make a fair trade. Give him Nikos and a reasonable amount of coin, too, and not come after either of them later. Don't you think he'd agree to it? Across the room, bound in his chair, Nikos laughed feebly, until an orc silenced him with a slap. I suppose that is the proper response to my suggestion, sighed the small man. Aaron would have to be mad to trust us at this point. Your malice and bungling saw to that. Kesk glared. Get it straight once and for all, the Tanarite grumbled. I'm not your lackey, and I don't take orders from you. I did what I thought best. And look how far it's got us. As far as your nimble-fingered wizardry and magical toys. Toys you extorted from me after I spent years collecting them. The mage countered. I wouldn't care if it had done some good, but even equipped with enchanted gear, your red axes couldn't lay their hands on one lone wood cutpurse. Instead, he made you look like a dunce in front of the entire city. Kess had been thinking something similar himself, which only made the magician's taunt rankle all the more. For a second, he was so angry that it choked off the words in his throat, and the merchant saw something in his face that made the eyes above the Lannister's scarf widen in alarm. Well, grinned Kesk, when he was able, I'm not going to look foolish for much longer. Tomorrow I'm going to put an end to this business. How? My people will spread the word that if Aaron doesn't hand over what I want by midnight, I'll chop his father's head off and dump the sundered pieces in Lasclar's square. The wizard shrugged and said, You've been threatening Nikos' welfare right along. How would this be any different? Because of the deadline, my promise to display the corpse to the whole city, and the fact that my men will repeat it to every robber, slaver, and whore they can find. Aaron will know I have to follow through. Otherwise, I'll lose respect. The magician cocked his head and asked, You mean, if things don't work out as planned, you actually mean to do it? Yes. Then we lose our hold on Aaron, don't we? With Nikos slain, what's to stop him from fleeing Weevil with the Black Bouquet still in his possession? Nothing, I guess. At least I'll be rid of him, Kesk replied, and you. Without me for a partner, you'll never rise any higher than you have already. Kesk sneered and said, Maybe it doesn't look like it to you, but since the day I first came to Weevil with nothing but this axe to help me carve out a life, I've climbed pretty high already. If I never go any farther, that will be all right. You don't mean that. Oh yes, I do. And you can't talk me out of it. So why don't you turn that twisty mind to yours to the task of laying a trap that Aaron can't possibly escape? Aaron kept quickening his pace despite the fact that even under normal circumstances, it could be dangerous to race headlong through the underways. You could blunder into a strong-armed robber lying in wait for easy prey, or intrude on plotters willing to kill to keep their palavering a secret. Thus, whenever he caught himself, he forced himself to slow down, but it was hard. After fleeing Kesk's mansion, he and Mary had slept aboard an unattended skiff moored at one of the docks. Restless, anguished over their failure to rescue Nikos, he woke first and rose to prowl the streets. It was then that he overheard a team of thieves, 2 pickpockets, a big man, and a lookout discussing Kesk's well-publicized threat to murder his hostage at midnight unless Aaron gave him what he wanted. Since then, he felt a seething urgency that made him want to hurry every instant, whether it was sensible or not. "Do you really think," said Mary, striding along beside him with her bow slung over her shoulder, "our allies are likely to do more than they have already? We won't know until we ask." "Actually," said the scout, "I already did ask when we talked to their thief, the first time, if you recall, and he said he'd snipe at the red axes on the sly, but not risk open war." Squinting against the darkness, Aaron peered down the passage. These people stood murmuring to one another at the next intersection. He recognized one of them, and once more had a quash the impulse to rush. "Then I'll just have to change his mind," the thief said. "I tell you, visiting him again is just a waste of precious time. Let's go to my employer. We had this talk already." The trio ahead were good at their trade. They didn't even glance up at Aaron and Mary drew as Aaron and Mary drew nearer. "We had it hours ago," said the scout, "and you promised to come up with a new strategy. This desperate notion won't do, and if it's all you can think of, then we need to try things my way. Fury's hard. Try behaving like a decent, law-abiding person for once in your life. You might like it." "I might like it all the way up the gallows steps." The loiterers were just a couple of paces away. Aaron's heartbeat quickened. "I swear by the Forest Queen," said Mary, "I'll make sure you aren't punished. My employer doesn't care about you. He only wants his property returned." Aaron pivoted and threw a punch. Mary must have seen him swing, for she reacted with the quickness of a trained warrior. She dodged, and he only struck her a glancing blow. She sprang back and reached for the hilt of her broadsword. The problem was that by retreating from Aaron, she'd merely shifted closer to his three confederates. The largest of them, a half-orc with a broken nose, lashed its cudgel against her back. The blow snapped her leather armor, and she lurched forward. The other 2 ruffians lunged at her, bludgeons flailing. She swept her buckler in a backhand stroke that held them off long enough for her sword to clear the scabbard. The half-orc recoiled, and her blade missed its torso by a finger's length. A passerby who'd stopped to watch the show cried out in excitement. Aaron edged in on her flank, then faked a leap into the distance. She turned and thrust, and that gave the half-orc a chance to give her another blow from behind. It knocked her to one knee, and the creature's human partners swarmed over her. Her sword was useless of such close quarters. After a few moments of frantic struggling, they pummeled her into submission, then lashed her hands behind her back with rawhide. "When I said you were learning to think like an Weebelin native," Aaron said to her, "I give you too much credit. You told me how one fellow led you into a trap here in the tunnels, and now you've let exactly the same thing happen again. I don't think Sephiroth will save you this time around. Mary glared up at him. Blood trickled from her split lip. Why are you doing this? She asked. You can't help me rescue my father. Maybe if you had the rest of your precious guild behind you, but not by yourself. I gave you your chance, but you aren't skilled or brave enough. Shall we get her moving? Asked the half-orc. Yes, Aaron said. His confederates hauled Mary to her feet and relieved her and her belt pouch and remaining weapons. The half-orc shoved her to set her stumbling in the right direction. I'm a better fighter than you, she said, still focused on Aaron. I still don't see the point of this. It's simple enough. I can't trust Kess to hold to any deal we make. You and I alone can't fight all the Red Axes or sneak into their lair a second time. So I've decided to save my father with gold. I'll bribe one of the gang to smuggle him out. Maybe that will work, she said, but the half-orc gave her another push. Unfortunately, Aaron said, the Axes are all afraid of their chief and they live pretty well already. That means it's going to take a lot of coin to tempt one of them. More than I've got and more than I can steal in the time remaining. I wouldn't be able to sell the Black Bouquet quickly enough either, or use the book itself as a bribe. Kesk's cutthroats wouldn't understand what it is or why it's vulnerable any more than I did until you explained it to me. But you decided what you could do, Mary said. But you decided what you could do, Mary said, is sell me. Aaron grinned and replied, I found out who wanted all those Yanti to capture you, then asked him if he was still interested. It turns out he is, so we arranged the details. Listen to me, she said. You don't have to do this. If you want to try bribery, I can get the gold from my employer. I won't even have to mention your name. He shook his head and told her, I feel safer dealing with my own kind. Curse you for a liar and a traitor. You have rat's blood in your veins. What did you expect, Aaron asked. You're the one who said I'm just a common thief with no notion of what honor means. I didn't truly want to believe that. Well, believe this, he said. Folk like you and me are natural enemies. You killed my friends, and even if none of that was true, I'll sell out you and 100 like you to save my father. Look, it's your new home. They marched her onward through the entrance of Melder's door. Even at that hour, when so many of Weevil's rogues were snoring in their beds, the stone-walled common room held a motley assortment of travelers and waiters, and, as usual, tiny dragons glittering everywhere. Most everyone, whether human, goblinkin, or reptile, eyed Murray with curiosity, some with malicious amusement, and none, so far as Aaron could judge, with sympathy. Smiling handsomely clad in a red silk shirt and black suede jerkin laced with scarlet cord, Melder sauntered up to inspect his prize. Mary spat at him, and a dozen of the little worms hurtled at her like bees defending a violent hive. Melder raised a swarthy hand, and the dragons veered off. Please, he said to Mary, I can all be quite pleasant, if you'll only allow it to be. I'll kill you for this, she said, and even if I fail, the Red Heart Guild will avenge me. As your own experience demonstrates, Melder said, your friends had better stick to their forests and mountains. Weevil will eat them alive. He looked at the half-orc. Why don't you lock her away? Then I'll pay you. The creature and its fellow kidnappers manhandled Mary across the common room. She struggled every step of the way, but with her hands bound to no avail. She and her captors disappeared through a doorway. I'd like to get paid too, Aaron said. Surely, Melder said. Went. The hobgoblin A hobgoblin appeared at his elbow with a clinking pigskin purse in hand. Aaron untied the laces, lifted the flap, and stirred the coins inside with his fingertip, which afforded him a glimpse of the ones at the bottom. "Thanks," Aaron breathed. "I realize," Melder said, "that these days you have to be careful about lingering too long in any one place. But will you have a glass of something before you go?" Aaron smiled a crooked smile and said, "I suppose I might as well celebrate. This was the first plan that's gone off without a hitch since before I robbed the pair." Zephyrus heard voices echoing down the tunnel, and though she couldn't make out the muttered words, instinct warned her she had cause for caution. She cast about and spotted a notch in the wall, containing a steep flight of steps that probably linked this section of the underways to somebody's cellar. She silently hurried part way up the steps, above the eye level of anyone likely to pass below, then crouched motionlessly in the narrow, unlit space. Sure enough, 2 red axes tramped by. She recognized them from the time she'd spent among the gang, and assumed they were scouting the tunnels near Melder's door for the same reason she was. They'd heard the gossip that Aaron Sir Randall had visited the inn to sell his former ally to the proprietor. It seemed unlikely that Aaron was still lingering in the area, but it also seemed inexplicable that he'd made such a conspicuous display of himself in Melder's establishment in the first place. In any case, Zephyrus didn't know where else to look for him, so there she was. She crept down the stairs and onward through the darkness in the opposite direction from Kesk's henchmen. She encountered other ruffians, some of whom eyed her speculatively, but when she returned their stares, making it clear she registered their interest without the slightest flicker of alarm, they allowed her to continue on her way unmolested. It was difficulty to keep track of time underground. Eventually, though, she became convinced she'd been searching for quite a while. Certainly, she was retracing her steps through sections of tunnel she'd traveled before. Maybe she thought she should return to her sanctuary and consult the Arcanaloft after all. Then, some distance ahead, a lanky figure stepped from a doorway. He froze for a moment as if startled to see her, which gave her a decent look at his face. Though the gloom dulled the bright copper of his hair to a nondescript gray, Zephyrus recognized the man she'd come to find. She sprinted towards him. She'd tended the wounds she'd received the night before, and though her thigh ached, she was able to run as fast as ever. She snatched a chakram from her pocket and broke stride for a split second, required to fling it spinning ahead of her, skimming low to maim Aaron's leg. The ring flew as true as any cast she'd ever made. Unfortunately, however, it was a long throw, which gave Aaron time to dodge. He scrambled into the first riser of the staircase and up and on up, out of sight. When she followed him onto the steps, she realized from the wantress of sunlight leaking down from overhead that they connected the tunnel with the outdoors. If Aaron reached the top, it might give him the chance to flee in more than one direction, or lose himself in a crowd. Resolved to catch him while he was still inside the stairwell, she ran even harder. From above her came a sudden clatter. She was still peering, trying to figure out what the sound meant, when her sandal landed on something small, hard and round. The object rolled, and despite all her training, threw her off balance. She fell, caught herself, and at the same time realized that Aaron tossed a quantity of marbles bouncing down the steps. Good trip, but the fall hadn't injured her, nor delayed her for more than an instant. She could still catch him. She raced on. As she neared the top of the steps, the daylight dazzled her. She squinted against it, but still missed seeing the cord. Her quarry had stretched at ankle level. She tripped and fell a second time. Her wounded leg throbbed, and she suspected she'd torn open the cut. He still hadn't stopped her, nor saved himself. He'd simply annoyed her, which meant it was going to be even more satisfying to hurt him. She scrambled up into a little unpaved cul-de-sac. Towers rose around her, with rain spans linking the upper stories. To her right, a door slammed. She dashed to it and grabbed the black wrought handle. It turned. The latch disengaged, but the panel wouldn't push open. She had to kick it twice to dislodge the wooden wedge her quarry had used to jam it shut. Judging by the look and stink of the interior, the spire was another of Weevil's squalid tenements, with hordes of paupers living, breeding, and dying in its tiny rooms. Aaron's footsteps thudded on the stairs, zagging away into shadow overhead. Cephres raced after him. She thought he'd vaulted onto one of the elevated bridges, but he surprised her. He ran all the way to the top floor, then scrambled up a ladder and through a trapdoor. She expected him to lie in wait by the hatch, poised to knife her, and when she swarmed up the ladder, she was ready to defend herself. It wasn't necessary. What he had actually done was retreat to the very edge of the square, flat roof, then top up on the low parapet that ran along it. It had to be another trick, didn't it? She looked at him and all around, but couldn't spot the hidden threat. "You're fine," he painted. "I'm the one who's in danger. If I lose my balance, if anything jostles me, I'll fall to my death." "What does this mean?" she asked. You don't think I just happened to be carrying a bag of marbles to a tripcord and a wedge around with me, do you?" He replied with a grin. "I wanted to talk to you, so I let people see me in the door. I figured you'd hear about it and come sniffling around. I spotted you, let you do the same to me, and then used my tricks to slow you down while you chased me. I couldn't let you catch up until I led you here. You won't throw a spell or one of those rings at me now, will you?" "What I will do is take hold of you and pull you down," she said, then started forward. "Don't try," Aaron called. "I'll jump, and you'll never find out where I hid the black bouquet." She didn't believe him, but she wasn't absolutely sure she was right, and thus she hesitated. Maybe it would be safer to hear him out first, and call his bluff later, if need be. It wasn't as if he could evade her. He'd backed himself into a corner. "I don't think you want to die and leave your father in the Tannerets' hands," said Cephres. "You're right, but I know I can't save him by myself, or working with Miri, for that matter. That's why I sold her to Melder." Cephres frowned, trying to follow his train of thought. "What do you mean?" she asked. "What did betraying Miri accomplish?" "Well, I told people it was to raise the coin to bribe one of the Red Axes. That's not practical. That's not practical, considering that none of them is any more trustworthy than Kesk himself. I just wanted folks to think it was the reason, so they wouldn't figure out I was getting rid of her to clear the way for you." "Clear the way for me?" "Yes, I can't very well work with I can't very well work with you and Mary both, considering that you both demand the black book in payment, and you're the one I need. You fight better than anyone I've ever seen, and you're a sorceress on top of it. Her talents are nothing compared to yours. So you're offering me the bouquet in exchange for my help in rescuing your father, and peace between you and me afterwards. I agree. Aaron smiled and said, Good, except that I don't believe you yet. Maybe it's because I'm such a faithful liar myself, but it strikes me that you might promise anything to lure me into your clutches, with no intention of keeping your word. I swear by Shar that I will. Some deities might object to their worshippers making false vows in their name, but the Lady of the Lost wasn't one of them. She wanted her work done by any means necessary. Indeed, she relished treachery and oath-breaking to the extent that she could be said to savor anything in the vile stew that was creation. That's wonderful, Aaron said, an ironic edge in his voice. But even so, I want to ask you something. How did my father hold up under torture? Fairly well, she admitted. In truth, Nikos had borne up remarkably well. After what he'd suffered, he should have been too cowed to utter a word unbidden. Yet, instead, he exposed her identity to the mage with the blackwood cane. Remember, Aaron said, he's old and sick. I'm young, healthy, and my father's son. I could hold out even longer. I could sit on the location of the book until it's too late, until the cursed thing's destroyed. Until the cursed thing is destroyed. She felt a thrill of dismay and asked, Destroyed? How? If I told you, it might help you figure out where it is. Just take my word for it. If I don't fetch it from its current hiding place by sunrise tomorrow, that will be the end of it. Your only hope of getting it is for me to hand it over voluntarily. I understand, she said, and it was so. Evidently, she did have to play along for the time being, and that was all right. Eventually, a moment would come when he no longer held the formulary hostage, and at that moment, she'd repay him in full for all the trouble he'd caused her. Good. Aaron stepped down off the parapet. He was trying to appear confident, and it would have fooled most people, but she could read the tension in his lean frame, the fear that she was going to lunge at him. It made her wish she could. He said, Here's what I think we should do.